Infrastructure, a big issue here in Louisville. Highways, bridges, airports, fuel taxes, broadband. All of them are covered in the section of the report on infrastructure. Highways, we rank low in urban congestion. Anybody come in 64 yesterday or today to try to get down here? That's a big issue for northern Kentucky, for Louisville. So those are things that we've addressed there. And broadband is a significant issue for Kentucky, especially in rural areas. Strengths, highways rank well, 14th. Fuel taxes are relatively low. Urban congestion is a weakness. And fatality rates in Kentucky are relatively high. Recommendations, we need to invest in infrastructure. Protect the dedicated road fund. Sometimes the legislature gets tempted to take a few dollars from this and supplement the state police or to supplement the general fund, that sort of thing. And it takes away money that otherwise would be paving potholes. Promote wireless and broadband. Those are the three recommendations that we offer in infrastructure. Government spending and debt. You've heard us preach about the leaky bucket for the last couple of years. And this graph is kind of a different version of the leaky bucket, same theme. Since 2000, it doesn't have the dates on here, but since 2000, through the enacted 2012 state budget, which gets you out to 2014, so a 14-year span, general fund growth has been about 50%, 49.85%. And that's almost identical to the economic growth of the state of Kentucky. General fund has grown that much. But look at corrections, has grown 65%. Medicaid benefits, 123%, and that's just the state's portion. Public employee health insurance, 202%. It's unsustainable. You can't keep doing that. Public employees in Kentucky still get 100% of individual coverage. And somebody said, well, yeah, but Dave, health insurance has gone up everywhere. Everybody's had to pay more. Yes, but if you took that big blue line there and just reduced it to the national average that health insurance has gone up, it would be reduced in half. Remember when Governor Ernie Fletcher tried to trim back public employee health insurance and people came in busloads to the legislature, and the legislature enacted more benefits? Look at economic development. This is Secretary Larry Hayes trying to recruit jobs to our state. He's been hammered, minus 24%. The SEEK formula, which is the main formula by which Frankfort sends your school superintendent money to keep the doors open, and the governor and legislature, to their credit, have tried to keep that. They've tried to hold it harmless. But it's grown by 33% now, clearly less than the economy and less than the state's budget. Non-SEEK, that's like summer school, that's the Department of Education, that's transportation, it's professional training for teachers, just been hammered, no growth at all in 14 years. Post-secondary institutions, you heard that from our panel up here a while ago, only 6% increase in 14 years. Now, the leaky bucket says that there are leaks in our bucket, our state's budget, and the leaks are corrections, Medicaid, and public employee. We're paying those bills as though they're fixed costs, and then we say, oh, and by the way, do we have some left over for schools? And you can see who's getting the short end of the stick there. Economic development in schools, which is where we think we ought to be investing. That's why we've hammered and hammered away on the leaky bucket. And to the credit of the governor and the legislature, they have made gains in both of those areas, but still they're going to take aggressive management in the future. So strengths in government spending and debt, progress in limiting spending for corrections, Medicaid, public employee health insurance. We have made progress. In 2011, the best piece of legislation we think that came out of the legislature had to do with the corrections reform. We were just sending way too many people, some of which were nonviolent, low-level crime conviction, low-level drug convictions, and we put them in prison, cost $20,000 a year. We just couldn't continue that kind of indiscriminate incarceration. Weaknesses, state spending per capita is 20th, and state debt is 12th. Now, if I could just, on this subject here of spending and debt, mention what I think are the two locomotives that are coming toward the state capitol. If you can imagine the state capitol right here, there's the rotunda right there, okay? Smashing through this door in just a little while is a locomotive with pensions written on the side of it. And one smashing through that wall, another locomotive coming this way, is Medicaid expansion. We've got to keep very attuned to both of those. Medicaid with the Supreme Court ruling on the federal health care law. It says states don't have to expand. So you hear some governors saying, we're not going to expand in our state. Yeah, we'll see. But that's going to be a big debate on how do you expand Medicaid without taking money from your schools. Secondly, the pensions, and Kentucky has been listed as one of the top, as one of the worst 8, one of the worst 4 in another study, and in a study with the Wall Street Journal's website, the worst state in terms of our indebtedness, our pension, unfunded pension liability. It's a terrible problem. There's an interim legislative committee. Probably the most important work going on in Frankfurt today is that legislative committee trying to come up with something they can put to the legislature in this next session. Our pension debt is 8th. I think that's per capita. Pension debt per capita in Kentucky is 8th. So our recommendations: implement the sentencing reforms, that corrections reform that the legislature passed in 11. Monitor the expansion of Medicaid. It's going to be a very tough issue. Require public employees to contribute to health insurance. People in the private community have learned that they have to do that. Move to a defined contribution plan. In other words, our proposal would be to move toward a 401k. Not for existing employees. They're protected constitutionally with their benefits that they were promised the first day they signed up. But for the out years, we've got to move in that direction. Suspend COLAs, and that's not soft drinks. That is the cost of living adjustments for existing retirees. Until this thing gets fixed, until we get this thing back on track, we're going to have to suspend those. And the legislature, I think, that has done that the last 2 years. Oppose expansion of collective bargaining for public employees, which we think exacerbates the problem. Now, real quickly, signature industries and coal, bourbon, horses. Coal industry, apply environmental laws consistently. I have asked coal operators in eastern Kentucky, of all your problems that you face in this war on coal, how much of it is Washington, how much of it is Frankfurt? And consistently they say something like 90% is Washington, 10%. They give pretty fair marks, good marks, to Frankfurt. And there's our energy chairman, Rocky Adkins, back there. They give good marks to Frankfurt. Less so, obviously, they're really hostile toward what's going on in Washington. Urge Energy Cabinet to assert its authority as primary administrator. In other words, they have primacy on some federal laws, and we encourage them to be assertive about that. In the distilling industry, revise the burdensome state tax policies. You heard Bill Samuels yesterday in the pitch he made about how heavily Kentucky is taxing that signature product. In the equine industry, we happen to be in favor of expanded gaming. Clearly, it would create jobs, as many as 10,000 in the short term, and we favor that. In manufacturing, repeal the inventory tax, adopt a single sales factor. That's a technical thing that some of you would relate to and many of you might not, but it has to do with how you pay your corporate tax based on your sales or your property or your employees or some apportionment of that. Expand angel investor and technology reinvestment tax credits, which we mentioned before. Enact the right to work law. So, on page 5 of the report is the executive summary. I don't think it says executive summary, but that chart at the bottom gives what I've just walked through here with you, the weaknesses and the strengths. Are we ready for jobs? That's the question. I would say we have great advantages in Kentucky, but we've got a lot of work to do. So with that, I think we have a few minutes, Bill, a few minutes for a couple questions. Okay. All right. Any questions? Bob, you want to come up? Bob did a lot of the research on this, and Brian Sunderland, our Vice President of Public Affairs. Any comments about this? To my knowledge, it's the first time that I know the Chamber has packaged a report that basically tries to wrap a lot of the competitiveness issues into one cover. Any thoughts?
It's going to be a test. Everybody get out your
Yeah, that's right. Yes, sir. Back there. Yeah, there are a couple of court battles in states, one of which is in Colorado, and I don't know how it's been resolved, probably hasn't been resolved yet, in which they're challenging those agreements and saying, you know, is there a constitutional right to those kinds of benefits? I'll give an example of how this works out in the Kentucky situation. The teachers' retirement system is separate from the Kentucky retirement systems, which is city and county and state police and all that. The teachers, I think, did a tremendous job. The teachers' retirement system, excuse me. They brought in the stakeholder. They knew they had a problem, and it was health cost basically driving the cost of their retirement, so much so that the retirement side of their equation was in jeopardy. So they brought the constituents in, School Board Association, Teachers Union, legislators, and others, and they sat down and they took what I call a reality pill. And they said, we got to do something. So, for example, my wife, who is a retired teacher, principal, but not yet 65, she was getting 100% of her care before, 100% individual coverage paid. Well, that was 2 years ago. Last year it went to $30 a month. This year to $84 a month. Next year to $131 a month. And all the stakeholders, including the teachers union, agreed to that because they realized if they didn't agree to that, their retirement was going to be in jeopardy. And so I think that's the reality pill that all of us in Frankfurt are going to have to take and negotiate those. There is a trend. Some of us are calling for a 401k type system. Some states have actually, and by the way, across the country, Democrats and Republicans are leading the charge on this in different ways. The treasurer of Rhode Island, for example, a Democrat who got elected with the support of public employee unions, turned around and said, hey, we got to deal with this reality, and has led a charge. There is also what is called a hybrid, where you would assure employees of a certain retirement, say maybe up to $30,000 of their wage, but after that it's a 401k type option. So, Bob, anything? Or
No, and I would just mention that the Pew Center on the States has been looking at this issue for several years now, and the task force that Dave mentioned that is meeting in Frankfurt is working with the Pew Center on the States. They were instrumental in the corrections reforms that passed last year. So there is high hopes that working with the Pew Center and their national experts that they can find some solutions to the pension problems.
Yeah, that's very encouraging because what they did on corrections was Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, saying we got to be smarter on crime. Hopefully that happens here. Yes, one more question here.
Yeah, I have a quick question. One thing I have not heard mentioned at any of these presentations I've been to is agriculture, farming, tobacco, stuff that used to be the backbone of the state. I mean, is that just dropped off the map in terms of economic development and future jobs? Is that just, we don't even consider that anymore?
No, actually, and you brought up an excellent point. We have understated the role of agriculture. It has done relatively well in this recession. Agriculture is huge. I read one report, 2 years ago in the Courier-Journal that 50% of jobs in the agricultural community in Kentucky are export related. So as China, and we've heard all about China and how the middle class is growing, and when they grow into the middle class, they decide they want chicken with their meal, not just rice, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we're sitting here ready to send them soybeans, corn, chickens, you know. And so there's tremendous potential. We are working with the agriculture community now. We've had more meetings in the last year with agricultural leaders than we have in my previous 6 years here for that reason. And so I'm glad you brought that up because that really is a bright spot for Kentucky. And it's not just corn and soybeans. It's wine, it's sheep, it's ginseng, it's thoroughbreds, it's bourbon, all related to agriculture.
There's a question right over here.
Okay, one more. Bonus question.
Dave,
yes.
Are you talking about contributions to health insurances of retirees? Because I work for the state and I do pay $350
You know, there are 4 or 5 levels of plans, but the basic plan is still 100% employee paid. Employer paid, right? So for some of those, and in the reforms that they made 2 years ago in the 2010 budget, the legislature just capped the amount of money that they were going to provide for health insurance, which in effect forced a lot of employees more toward that basic plan. So, or maybe you're talking about a family plan?
Yeah, that basic plan it's not great for what you get. I mean, you have to pay for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the insurance business, they spend hours determining what you need to pay for what you get. Yeah. But that's our concern there. Because in the private community of employers who have more than 50 employees, 90-something% provide insurance. Employers, which most employers are under 50 employees, only 40% provide health insurance to their employees. And among those 40% who do, they provide 80%. The employer pays 80%, the employee pays 20%. So there's two realities there of public versus private. But a lot of attention is going to be given to that in the next few years. It's going to be a tough one for the public sector to sort through. Thank you. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.